Hello, everybody, and welcome to OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack, and today I'm here with an LAIC meta discussion with two very special guests. They need no introduction, but I will let them introduce themselves. Pablo, do you want to kick us off?
Hey everyone, I'm Pablo Meza, aka Tablemon. I've been playing for a bit of a long time now, 20 years, and I'll be commentating LAIC this weekend.
Exciting stuff. And Tord?
My name is Tord. Also played for, I think, almost as long, not quite as long, 19, I think. And I will be playing LAIC again this year.
Excellent. So hopefully a broad perspective. Obviously, Tord ended up winning last year, and Pablo is going to have the caster's desk. So I'm hoping we've got some really insightful opinions here. So just for your guys' information, on the video, we're going to go through some general questions, then some deck-specific questions, and finally some quick-fire questions at the end. So first things first, I'm kind of going to open this to the floor. I think the early impressions of Paradox was going to be, it was Doomsday, Iron Hands was going to ruin the game, Valiant was going to ruin the game, Jirachi was going to get rid of a load of decks, all of this kind of stuff. And it feels like actually everything's fine. And it was all a lot of talk. And whilst these cards are definitely still good, they're maybe not as format ending as they may have seemed. Have you do you feel that's kind of, do you echo that, Pablo? Do you feel like it actually was okay? Things turned out all right?
Yeah, I definitely think things were very exaggerated in the grand scheme of things. And like having played for 20 years, I've seen this plenty of times, and people love to complain about cards and this new game-breaking card. And then once it's released, they want it banned. But realistically, I feel like the creators of the game do a really good job at balancing things in the grand scheme of things. So I generally wasn't too worried. I was like taking it with a grain of salt. And I think another important aspect to keep in mind is that the players at the very, very top, I think if there's a new broken card that is that broken, they're gonna be happy using it to win the next tournament, right? Instead of complaining about how the game's not fun anymore or this is so imbalanced. It's just like if the focus is on winning, then they're gonna use the best card available, whether it's Iron Hands, whether it's Auric GX, whether it's Lugia V-Star, whatever it is, right? So I definitely felt like things were very exaggerated, and the last couple of years have definitely shown us that they're doing things right, I think.
Yeah, I think we've definitely taken a step in a different direction at least. Same to you, Tor. Do you feel like everything was kind of overhyped, or do you actually think there are some things out there that are well worth the sort of shouting?
I know it was a very anticipated set though, and the hype has kind of like moved into like different cards as like we moved on. It's been, if you paid attention to like meta discussions and just like card talk over the last few weeks, like that's been a roller coaster. It's like a new card getting mega hyped and complained about or praised like every other day. And so the set obviously has like a lot of stuff going on for it. So I think it's pretty cool. November sets usually tends to be like the strongest ones we get, so no exception this time either. So I mean, it's pretty fun, and LAIC kicking off the first big tournament. So I think it will be pretty fun.
Yeah, definitely. We've gone from a pretty wide meta. I feel like 151 and kind of Obsidian Flame, because they kind of blend into one meta for me, but almost even to an extent Paldea Evolved as well. It's been a very gradual meta shift, and there's only been one or two new decks sort of released over the past 6 months. So we're in a format at the moment where there's like 10 or 11 viable decks, and I think nothing really changes. Has that sort of, for you, Tor, has that changed how you've approached testing for this tournament? Because there's a lot more to maybe reconsider as like already is good, or have you just sort of done everything as you would normally and kind of stuck to trying some new things, and if they're not working, going back to old faithful things that are working already?
Yeah, it's like honestly, this is a little weird, but honestly, my favorite formats are the ones where there's like one or two decks, so just kind of like stomp the rest because it's like relatively easy to pick a deck. And I enjoy most mirror matches. I know most people don't, but I think mirror matches is actually like kind of fun because it means that neither you or your opponent has a better deck than the other. Like it's about as even and close and fair you can get, right? Like if you both play the same deck. So I don't really mind that, and it makes the giant rock paper scissor less scary. Let's say if you have like 10 decks and 5 of the decks beat 3 of the other decks, but 3 of those beat 3 of the other ones, and um, then like you just hope you don't run into too many of the bad ones, right? No matter which one you pick.
Yeah.
But if everything is just like if we have some decks the meta kind of centralizes around, then it's easier to make that decision, right? Then you have to like play less of the matchup roulette again.
Yeah.
But that's just me. I taken like testing for this one like relatively normal, but I think there were so many cards in it that could potentially go into so many like different archetypes that there was a lot of like wrap like your head around. So definitely been putting in more effort for this set than like a lot of the other ones, just because there was a lot more stuff to like actually try out and see if was working as intended or not. And some things I've been positively surprised of, and some things have kind of fallen through like usual, I guess.
Yeah, makes sense. And I guess similarly for you, Pablo, as a caster, you need to kind of have an eye on pretty much every deck rather than necessarily honing in on one. Has this set made it easier or harder than usual? Because obviously we've got 10 or so decks already, but maybe you don't need to focus as much on those and you have time to look at some of the new archetypes because you've obviously casted in tournaments where we've had these decks already.
Yeah, so I think in the grand scheme of things, it has been a little bit harder for me at least, mostly because like personally I'm not preparing to win the event, right? But I do have people that I'm coaching that are going to play and want to do well, so I've been putting in the same effort. And what's been tough is like, because this is the first time I think in history of the Pokemon Trading Card Game that we get the cards the same time as Japan, right? We don't have this like 1 or 2 months of list refinement that we can use as a solid base for ourselves, right? Now it's creativity is where now it should be make the biggest difference. I want to say, because there isn't this like tried and tested guaranteed list that or solid base of 50 cards for a certain archetype. And also I think it's important to consider that or something that has made things more difficult, I think, is like whatever 60 I came up for Roaring Moon, for example, could be very different than the 60 that Tord has been testing for Roaring Moon, right? So then whatever I'm preparing for and expecting against Roaring Moon, if I sit down and play against someone, they could just have come up with something completely different from scratch. And that's what we're seeing, right? Some Rain and Ninja versions, some Cross Switcher versions, Darkrai V-Star, like feel like the lists are all over the place because we're seeing creativity factor in a lot more than ever before, from my perspective, right? So I think that's made it difficult, and also a little nervous with the people that I coach. Is like we're playing these matchups and we're playing these lists and refining these lists, but now it's much more difficult to make like specific predictions or educated guesses when you're playing against anyone, right? Because their list is probably not what we came up with and what we have been testing. Yeah, and as much as you pay attention to the online tournament results and to Japan and whatnot, there's so many sources of information coming from all over the place, and there isn't like still this one good great reference that I think will be LAIC, right? LAIC will be that trendsetter for the next 3 months, but prepping for LAIC, I think, is where creativity will be the most rewarded, and I think that's what's made it the most difficult, at least from that part of preparation for me and for the people that I coach.
Yeah, makes sense. A couple of other quick ones. Obviously, you've both been playing for a long time. For a while now, it's been pretty much universal that a lot of the time just going first is correct. Pablo, do you feel like we're moving to a meta where maybe it is correct for some decks to choose to go second, not only into specific matchups, but into a blind field? Are there any decks in particular?
For sure. I think the fact that Roaring Moon exists now means that you have to consider choosing to go second. I think the format definitely feels more aggressive and faster than prior Paradox Rift. So that means your setup has even much more weight than before. Therefore, if you go second, you get that extra turn of stabilization, right? If you're playing Arven's art, for example, you're playing 8 Battle VIP passes now, right? Instead of just the 4. So I definitely think, and that's what I've been encouraging my students to do, is like, I fully expect Roaring Moon to be the most popular deck in the room. Therefore, in a blind setting when you don't know what you're up against, you're probably better off going second, so you have a much more stable setup to receive whatever Roaring Moon will do against you. And ideally, them going first means they'll have a less explosive turn one, which it's only the Professor Sada, so it's not that big a deal. But I do feel like going second now has more merit than ever before. And I think that's going to continue if the game keeps up with this super hyper aggressive pace. I think that's definitely going to be the correct choice now.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, last one before we get some deck specific ones. Tord, what's been the most impactful card of Paradox Rift? Do you think it's Roaring Moon or one of the Iron EX cards, or is it actually just one of the trainer cards?
Honestly, it's like kind of hard to pick, but like I think the best card in the set is Conte Catcher. And like in terms of like power level, you could argue the vessel, but like Conte Catcher is like very flexible, and that will be like a staple like until it rotates, like in most decks that are not hyper aggressive. Like in terms of archetypes, you'll probably have to say like Roaring Moon, because although the cards are more like adaptations to like the already pre-existing meta decks again. But Roaring Moon is like, that card is so good you can build a whole deck around only that card. So and like it's strong against like most things. Obviously, like the whole deck is extremely linear, right? And like linear decks tend to fall short against. Like I feel like you need something a little bit extra if you're building and hoping to do well with like a Roaring Moon build. Otherwise, it's like at least like the last few days, like Gardevoir has been pretty hyped, and that deck seems to kind of farm it if you're not doing anything special. So
makes sense.
Yeah, Roaring Moon probably.
Cool. Okay. Speaking of Roaring Moon, let's jump on some specific questions. Pablo, you've just said it probably is going to be, or you think it's going to be the most popular deck in the room, or at least one of. What's the best way to play Roaring Moon in your opinion? Obviously, we've seen Turbo, we've seen with Moltres, we've seen like even Lost Zone builds, we've seen with Darkrai. Is there any way in particular you think is the best? And how do you feel about the whole Water Energy Greninja stuff? Is it worth it, or is it just a bit of a meme?
I do think it's worth it. It's definitely not something that I started with, but I do think it's like Tord mentioned, right? When you have such a linear deck, you need something extra. Otherwise, your opponent knows exactly what to expect, what you're gonna do the next turn, and it doesn't require a lot of preparation to be ready for that. So therefore, when you have the versatility of Radiant Greninja, when you have these other attackers, the Galarian Moltres, the Morpeko even. I feel like Morpeko is a very underrated attacker with the energy conservation, the free retreat versatility that it offers. So for me, like the 1/1 Darkrai V-Star build gives you that little extra of versatility. You don't always set it up. It's not easy to have there, and bench space is at a premium. But that version has felt the most versatile, and the one that allows me to outplay people rather than just slamming my Roaring Moon into the active and hoping for the best.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, cool. So yeah, Roaring Moon I think is going to be popular. I think another card or another deck that will still be very popular though is Gardevoir. Tord, as someone who has played a lot of Gardevoir over the past 6 months or so, I feel like Gardevoir is in a position at the moment where it actually has a lot more options than it ever has. It's got a couple of new attackers it can try. It's got a couple of new tech cards it can try. It's got a whole new engine it could try. First and foremost, are you on sort of the side of Arven and Evolution, or do you prefer the more traditional? And then how do you feel about the whole Screamtail Avery kind of conversation?
Let's start with the Evolution thing. So I feel like the Evolution package is fine, but it has like a very specific purpose, and that is to stop Iron Hands from going like absolutely ham on you before you set up at all. The Team Evolution is pretty good for that because you can get 2 Curlers in play, and then you can simply manual roll both of them into Gardevoir. Even if one gets sniped, you can like maybe get the 1 Recandy, right? Which isn't like too bad, and then you can try to deal with Iron Hands right away and like get rid of it before it takes 4. Only takes 2, and that's fine, right? Like if you manage that, then you can stabilize. Now, the problem, though, with the Evolution package is that, as we talked about, most people actually want to go second right now. And you have to cut wall cards and consistency to fit the Evolution stuff. And when they tell you to go second, your deck is extra bad because now you don't get to use the evolution stuff, and you also don't have any ball cards to set up stuff. So I feel like it's relatively high rolly to go for like that package. So I probably wouldn't recommend it. But it was like looking very tempting when like all the craze was on Iron Hands, and like you're really scared about that deck going rampant. But I think like if you're really that scared, just like play 4 Rare Candy or something, and try to high roll a good turn 2 instead.
Yeah.
Because at least the candies you can use properly like throughout the whole game. The Arven package or like the evolution tool has like a very limited time frame where it's very good, and it's like the second turn going second.
Yeah.
It's not good going first, and it's not good if you miss it going second. Like it feels like kind of limited. Screamtail is good, very good card. I was very positively surprised by how strong that card is, but it kind of makes sense though. It's like Cresselia on steroids, right? It's does a lot of damage. It does 40 damage wherever you want per energy you attach to it, and that's really good value. Like compared to Cresselia, like you can slam a candy turn to Gardevoir EX, and if you have 2 Psychic, that's not a lot. You get to snipe 80, which is not for like most basic Pokemon. So you can like mess up a lot of starts, like Lone Charmanders, Sniper Wolves, whatever. It's pretty strong, good card. You can also give a tool card as well. I mean, like make it a beast, I guess. So
yeah,
you can play into some fun plays in the late game with like Conte Catcher and Iono. But it's I think it's a staple for sure.
Okay, interesting. And I guess with some of these newer cards like the Cape, maybe the Screamtail, that kind of stuff. Do we have space for all of these cards as well as things like Jirachi? Do you feel like Jirachi is still needs to be played? Things like Cresselia, or do you have to? Are we at a point now where Gardevoir actually has to start thinking about what attackers it wants to play because it can't fit all of them in, as well as some of these other tech cards?
Yeah, it depends how hard you want to counter Sableye, I think. Like the Jirachi is more exclusively for like countering Sableye. Obviously you counter Medicham too, but that's like a little bit too niche, I think. Like Sableye is much more likely being something you actually hit. So if you want to be doing like really well into Sableye, then you want Jirachi. Otherwise, you can do Cresselia. Like I would like pick between them. I wouldn't like choose both. I feel like they kind of cover the same type of matchup. So like you're kind of overkilling if you play both of them. So I'm currently on like the Jirachi boat, but like Cresselia has like more overall usage. I'm just like feeling people always pick up Lost Box again. So people like using Sableye, and like they will force it if they have to. They go like Conte Catcher, canceling Cologne on the Jirachi if they really have to, So
they'll find a way.
Yeah, they will find a way for sure, right? I think I'm leaning towards that, but it's a very close decision, honestly, because Cresselia is better against like literally everything else again, and then you have like a snipe option against both Jirachi and Manaphy, and like they have to bench both if they want to protect their bench, which is madness, right? So like they're both pretty cool.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, another stage 2 deck is Charizard. Obviously, Charizard has typically done really well in Latin America, Pablo. Winning not only just winning, but kind of paving a whole new archetype or way of building Charizard. First question is kind of Bibarel or Pidgeot. Obviously, the Bibarel has kind of, again, come from the evolution idea, or do you still feel like Pidgeot's the best? And secondly, in the Bibarel build, if people are going to go down the route, how do you feel about all of the Toad Scroll conversation and the 1-2 line and that kind of stuff? Because it feels like that's something that we haven't really been able to do in Pokemon for like a few years, to be honest, having cool tech lines like that. Do you think they're worth it, or do you think just playing consistency is still king?
So in terms of Pidgeot versus Bibarel, having played with both versions, I'm still really surprised people are heading towards Bibarel. There's no comparison to having any card you want each turn versus having Bibarel. And as Tord mentioned, the high rollish nature of the TM evolution, like you're hoping to go second. If you don't get to go second, then the timing is just doesn't work. Yeah, your second turn, you're using that to maybe evolve, but then you can already get the Charmeleons because you obviously wanted Charmanders out, and then you don't want to evolve into Charizard EX anyways. because you want to use the ability. So it's just half the time it's not gonna work out really well. And if people are now choosing to go second, right? I feel like before Obsidian Flames, we saw Charizard and Azul had a good run in Toronto because you wanted to go second with that deck, and people didn't figure it out until like the very end of the format. But now, if most decks are trying to go second, you're just losing out on so much. And a turn to Charizard EX, if you go first, is still quite powerful, right? And the thing against Roaring Moon, for example, is like, sure, you could get an underwhelming start and that sucks, and then you're done. But if you get the turn to Charizard, right, like you can force the Roaring Moon to only be able to take one prize card in their first turn, yeah, because you don't have to become a 2-price deck until you choose to evolve. Therefore, you initiate the price trade-off. And if you're playing Defiance Band or other things to make sure you can target down the Roaring Moon, that should be good enough. So I played a little bit with the Beaverl version. I was like, what am I doing? This Beaverl is not on the same level as Pidgeot. And what was the other part of the question?
Just so in the Barrel list, do you feel the Toadscroll stuff is worth it, or do you think that's trying to do even more than?
Yeah, I definitely feel like that's getting a little too fancy. Like your number one goal is to get that early Charizard, and your number two goal is to get more Charizards. You rarely have time to get out the Toadscroll, and Chien-Pao Baxcalibur is not a significant portion enough of the metagame to justify playing such a specific tech, right? Which is just like it's too specific, yeah. And as Tord was mentioning, the decision between Jirachi and Cresselia, I've been always leaning towards Cresselia because it's not like Lost Box was unwinnable before, right? Gardevoir had a ton of success and could beat Lost Box. It's a matter of stabilizing, right? And the Cresselia turn completely turned things around a lot of the time. So just as I would definitely like I've barely been fitting Jirachi in anything really as of late. Like it was such a hyped up good card when it was revealed, but I feel like we got it late, right? Japan got it in that middle of the like in between our Paradox Rift before all the Ancient and Future. But I think Toadscroll applies the same. Yeah, it's just Chien-Pao Excalibur. It's not big enough of a threat. It's not the 30% Lugia metagame that we had before. It's not dominated by Chien-Pao Excalibur, so and it's not like it's unwinnable anyways, right? It's close, it's difficult, it's a little unfavored, but they can also have a crap setup, right? So I definitely would favor consistency every single time, and especially against in this tournament where there's so much unknown and this creativity and things you need to anticipate and prepare for, and also improvise in the moment. The more reliable your deck is, the better. If it's clunked with all these tech cards, then you're not gonna get far.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's talk about Chien-Pao, because I feel like Chien-Pao was kind of creeping into potentially tier 1 based on some of its results, still maybe down in that tier 2. Tord, is it the best Iron Hands user, and does it still need to play the cross switcher cancelling alone kind of cheesy stuff, or is it actually one of the best Iron Hands users and that's just the new way it tries to win games?
I mean, the deck is fine. I think before this set, it had the highest power level in format. Like, you can blow up anything. You have Greninja. You can take prices on the small guys, right? You have like others, like single price attackers as well. You can use, right? Like you're looking attack with Excalibur. Some list played Luminion as well, and that's also essentially a single price attacker when you're attacking with it, since you promote the single price attacker. So you can force that. And in this format, it is the same, but now like you have Iron Hands as well. So now you have even more ways to cheat in the price exchange again. I think like one of the nastiest thing you can do with that deck is like you can be like really far behind, and then like suddenly your Chien-Pao gets knocked out, and you just like do a little smack with Excalibur to set up for Iron Hands. They have to take one, and then boom, you go and take your 3 with like a counter catch afterwards, and like you're cheating the price it really hard. The like the deck still lacks a little bit in the setup phase because you need quite a lot turn 1 to not get taken properly advantage of. Like we have some really fast decks right now. Like Maran still like used to be a big problem. Now we have Roaring Moon too, which is plays out relatively the same. Like they turn 1 smashes out something you have. So then like there's a lot of pressure on you to answer immediately, and if you don't, then this game starts snowballing really quick. Like Roaring when turn 1 smashes out your Chin Pao, you better have the return knockout ready, right? Or else that game might be too far gone already. So I still think it's like a good deck, and it feels so good when you set up like 2 Beaverell and 2 Baxcalibur. It's like, oh, it's so unbeatable. But I know I think like there was a reason why it was picked by a lot of people in like the Elite Four tournament, like the big prestige tournament they had in Japan, like with a lot of their best players. I feel like they picked it a lot because it's just such a powerful deck that if they set up, like they will win, right? So, and like in a tournament where you're very unlikely to be able to, outplay anyone else there, you might as well pick the deck with slightly more variance in setting up, and then if you set up, you win instead. Like take those percentages, and which seems like relatively fair to me. It's not a deck I would feel very comfortable like picking as a tournament deck. Though I still think like it plays slightly too few supporters, and like it has a little bit too shaky of a early game. But like after setup, that deck is incredible. So
Yeah, I agree. I think it's insane when it works, and it feels awful when it doesn't.
Yeah.
Next up, let's talk about Tina, because I feel like Tina has once again potentially well, it's done really, really well in Japan, and potentially we're talking about Tina being one of the best decks in format again. But it really felt like it kind of flopped. It was meant to do really well at, in sort of both the Obsidian Flame and the 151 metas, and it only had a couple of particularly good placements. Pablo, is Tina going to flop again, or is it actually with Countercatcher now just genuinely a really good deck again? That was just the piece it was missing.
I definitely don't think Countercatcher was the missing piece. I think Tina's biggest issue always comes down to the beginning and how you need a very powerful start to actually have a good enough middle and later stages of the game. I myself defaulted to Tina both for Worlds and for the regionals where Chars are dominated in Curitiba. And Tina is like the best 50-50 deck where no matter what your opponent flips over, you're never sad or you're never like, dang, I don't want to go up against this. But you're also never like, yes, I hit this matchup, right? You know it's always going to be a struggle. And you definitely have room to outplay people. The powerfulness of Roxanne plus Path to a Peak and now with Countercatcher should definitely not be underestimated. So the deck did get better with Countercatcher, but that was not the deck's issue. I feel like it's always the early game, and you have the extra consistency of a beat seeking, but you also have to risk a two briser to accomplish it. So it's like what you gain in consistency in that regard compared to other Lost Box decks, you lose in explosiveness and you lose in the liability that you have to put up. So Tina can definitely have a deep run in the tournament. I do not think it will ever be best deck in the format. Same as the Lost Box variants, they're just like too hit or miss. It feels sometimes like you need a very explosive start and everything flows normally, but then you get a stabilized start with a few energies and your stadium and your Mirage Gate. You have too many dead cards in the beginning for it to be reliable. And I used to love Lost Box before rotation, but after rotation, I've never felt comfortable with it. And I played Tina at those two events out of like lack of a better option because nothing has felt like easy or great or like natural for me since rotation. Other than Mu VMAX, but I feel like Mu VMAX is always so like I don't know, such a big hit or miss as well. So I really don't think Tina is gonna be the deck to beat. No, it has everything you'd want in a deck: one hit KO options, big powerful damage, no weakness, and reliable bench reliable bench threats along with disruption. But pulling all of that off in a single game is never easy.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. On Lost Box in general, Tord, what's the best way to play Lost Box now if it's not Tina? Obviously, I think the big rhetoric on at least social media and stuff at the moment is Turbo is completely done, and maybe if you want to play Lost Box, Charizard is the way to play it. How do you feel about Lost Box variants at the moment?
I know that's like a very broad question, I guess. Like, does that just count any deck with Comfy and Colress?
I guess I guess any Confe deck that isn't Tina. The ones I'm thinking of are like Turbo, Kyogre, Charizard, and then maybe if you consider this Roaring Moon Lost Box deck a thing or not, like maybe that as well. But I guess the main three are Kyogre, Charizard, or Turbo.
I mean, they all have like the same 50 card core, so they're like you just change the color of the energies and you change the attackers, and like it's very much all like the same deck though. Like it's all in the engine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the engine is still pretty strong, I think. Um, I like a lot of the new options we got in this set. Like we got a lot of really good basic Pokemon you can jam into Lost Box. So, um, like Roaring Moon, obviously a good one, right? Like you just do it directly there. Um, you can do Iron Hands as well. Like it's a little bit more expensive. Usually costs you like 2 gates, but also not a bad option. I think Kyger is also, relatively underestimated because like that's pretty good into Roaring Moon and into like Miraidon. Like they still don't play Manaphy, right? So you can get away with the 4 price turn there. They also don't really play that much hand disruption either. So like you can have a lot of fun against those. But yeah, I know I never like it's been a while since I've been like a big fan of the Confi engine. I was a big fan when we had Scoop Up Nuts. I feel like that was good. That was strong. And we got the speed we wanted, right? That was like the turn to Sableye every time. But I don't like after we lost Scoop Up Nuts, it felt like a little bit more, fair, so to speak. Yeah, a little bit too fair. And also, like Iono in general, it's a little bit annoying to play against Iono when you can't like really prepare like a great board. Like one of the biggest perks like that engine had is that you can play Sableye, and Sableye is kind of like your savior, right? Like when you get your hand stripped away from you and like your active blown up, um, then like the deck doesn't have drawn board, right? Like you have a Comfy, but that's very minimal. And Comfy like isn't even straight draw. It's like you need to promote it, and then the card you pick might just be a card to like fix the fact that it's in the active already. So um, it's not like too great. And now the Sableye, which used to be your savior, is like you have to always wonder if it's just neutralized by Hirachi again. So and like some stage 2 decks you used to prey on, like Gardevoir and Charizard, now might randomly have Hirachi, and that might not be an option anymore. And they're also pretty good at just jamming Ionos down on you, which is annoying. Like obviously you can still beat them, but like it feels definitely a little bit more lottery than before. Before you could like save it relatively easy, but now it's not as easy.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, so the last few, we'll take a look at Miraidon. You just mentioned it, Tord. Pablo, how do you feel Miraidon does? Do you feel like it's just a worse Roaring Moon, it's just a worse racing deck, or do you think because it's got a few more options, maybe like Iron Hands and the cheesy sort of Judge Path stuff, it's still worth considering, and it's not just this racing deck that I guess Roaring Moon is?
I definitely think it's still worth considering. And I mean, I saw JW win that regional in Toronto. It definitely gave me like obviously I've been playing Raiden since it came out. Seeing him play it, seeing the comments that he made, especially made me realize like, sure, Raiden on paper feels like, oh, but if you don't hit your generators, then the deck's gonna suck, right? Well, Lost Box, if you don't hit your Call Resist, the deck's gonna suck. Roaring Moon, if you don't hit your Sadas or your Dark Patches, the deck's gonna suck, right? So every deck has its inherent electric generator. How impactful it is has different levels of like, I don't know, impactfulness. However, I do think Maran has merit, and I think Maran is like a very powerful deck in the sense that one Maran gets you set up, right? I think that's what lets you like guarantee that you're gonna be able to play all 3 games, and they're all gonna be close or not. Of course, as the game advances, your like your power level decreases, right? For the most part, as you run out of resources, you run out of generators, you weren't able to set up the Flaffies or they got KO'd because they are liabilities. But I do think Maridon has has a good chance. I think it's definitely an underrated deck. And if you're going to trade 2 for 2, well, trading Maran versus Roaring Moon, that's fine, right? And if you're playing the Zapdos, you can hit those 230s. You'll have Squawk or Luminions to hunt down on the bench as well. Raiku's a pretty efficient attacker to take those down. So I do feel like the deck has everything it would require. And the fact that we shifted a little bit away from slower setup decks to more like we'll trade 2 for 2 and see who wins first in 4 turns. Raiden definitely has a good chance at competing there, and now has Iron Hands as well to compensate for when your opponent leaves a single prize during the active. It's not easy to power up. You do have to add double turbo perhaps, or right hand into the deck to make sure that you can power it up on that specific turn or to retaliate. But I feel like it just added to the deck. So I think Raiden is definitely well positioned. It's definitely not the best deck, but it can certainly compete with Roaring Moon in the 2 for 2 price trade-off.
Yeah, definitely. Lugia was the big sort of winner of the last LAIC, but it's taken hit after hit basically ever since rotation. Tord, is single strike Lugia basically dead now? Is that just is the only way to play it the more colorless build? And if so, do you like the whole Vessel Hands combo, or are you still, again, is that a bit too much when Lugia is already a kind of lottery deck in that you need to flip so many coins to just get your turn to Archeops these days?
I mean, so the vessel is actually not the worst, because you get access to some really cool attacks, and like Lugia, that whole engine of Archeops, right? Like being able to charge, very interesting attackers. I feel like is the best part about the deck, and you definitely lost a lot of that, and you lost all your best energies, right? But you had some left, right? But not to the same degree. But with the vessel, you suddenly get to add a couple of really cool ones in again. Like you get to play with Radiant Star again. That's a big one. Like being able to just jam that thing immediately is really strong. And you get to play with Iron Hands. That's also cool. I also think like a Water Energy is kind of cheeky as well, so you can get rid of your Luminion. Honestly, that was one of the best things about Lugia, was that you could shuffle Luminion, like in the old format, because like Luminion became your whole engine. You get to you continuously re-bench Luminion every turn to get supporter. Like ever since we didn't get that, Lugia has lost a lot of its consistency. Now there's very common to see Lugia just not play supporter for multiple turns, right? They just set up and then hope for the best with their gift energies, and usually relatively easy to play around those now, especially with the counter catcher into the mix. The Archetypes are much more susceptible, but now you can shuffle the minion. That helps. It helps a little bit. You can shuffle,
yeah,
and you get to draw more. And the vessel, of course, also doubles up as another way to discard your Archetypes as well, because of the extra effect. So I think it's fine. I think it's definitely more fun. I'm not sure if it actually helps the deck that insane or anything. Say compared to just playing the single strike version, which is also very powerful, but slightly more inconsistent than the colorless one, right? The same thing is the vessel thing, right? So yeah. It's going to be an interesting one. I still think the deck is good, but it's definitely not as good as it was during its glory days last year during LAIC.
It's it took a bit of a hit. Pablo, Mew, talk to me. Is Fusion Mew or DC Mew one or the other? Is there a particular way? And do you think people are going to be playing? Do you think people are going to be respecting it and playing Tomb and Drapion? Obviously, Tomb has a bit more of a wider reach and it affects other things as well. But do you think people are going to be respecting it as well as or as much as they usually do?
I definitely think it's not going to be respected at all. I feel like this term is going to show I wish we could see the amount of copies of Drapion and Spiritomb played at the event. I think especially Drapion will be at an all-time low. I definitely think Roaring Moon EX is a dark type basic Pokemon that can 1KO, and there's a big focus on dark types, right? Which is understandable, and probably means you need to have a lot of courage to play Mew VMAX. However, if you dodge Roaring Moon, I definitely don't think you're going to be encountering a lot of Drapions or Spiritombs at all. And of course, hoping to dodge the most popular deck in the room is a big a big ask, right? However, it's not like in Lugia days, right? Roaring Moon is not going to be 30%. It's going to be 50%, 15% tops, I would imagine, based on how spread out the metagame is. So that leaves 85% that isn't Roaring Moon, and that you can probably cheese with Judge Path. So if I were going with Mew VMAX, I would definitely try to cheese with Judge Path. I love the games, and that was generally my strategy for EUIC. I think when there's so many unknowns, right? EUIC was essentially what we are encountering now. Brand new format, a lot of unknowns, right? No precedents, no beforehand information or prior or a lot of resources to build up from. And that's where if every deck's gonna not be optimized, if every deck is gonna have areas of opportunity, if you will, that's where you judge path them, and then they're not gonna walk out of that. So I would definitely favor that version. The fusion version is definitely the safer build to protect from counters, to not have the 3 prizer exposed. But in the end, Mew VMAX is just as capable as racing in the 2-2 race. And even against Roaring Moon, you'll definitely want to go first against them. If they don't get the KO on your Genesect, then you might be able to boss them first. And with the disruption, getting a third Roaring Moon powered up, they'll definitely be able to power up the first. They'll definitely be able to power up the second. But having a third Roaring Moon with 3 energies ready to go might not necessarily be easy, as long as you get the first KO, right? So that's sort of, and like I feel like a turn 1 path also sticks every version of Roaring Moon. So if you get that going first, then if they don't have the immediate Pokestop, game's over immediately. So I definitely feel like Mew VMAX is going to be the least respected, and therefore it has the biggest chance of success at LAIC.
Interesting. Okay. Tord, Iron Valiant. Do you feel like there is a best way to play it, or do you still feel like it's a very unexplored card? We have a load of different sort of archetypes seeing, or people trying it with the Rapid Strike stuff, with Entei, with Zato and stuff. Do you feel like there is a best way to play it yet, or is it still being explored?
I think like everyone is trying like different variants, but they're all trying to like solve a problem that I'm not sure if can be solved with the deck, and that's just like the nature of it. It's extremely cheesy, if that makes sense. So like it's very all in the beginning, and it's also pretty matchup dependent. If you face something with a lot of HP, you can take advantage of what you're trying to do, and that is like stealing an extra turn in the early game by pinging something and then taking an extra turn and then smashing something out. If they don't have anything to ping and Yoga Loop, then your strategy just doesn't work. And like there's multiple decks where it just doesn't work great against. Like Mew was one of them, right? Roaring Moon is another one. Like these decks are just like too beefy. And regardless of which partner you smash in with it, it like doesn't really make it. I was like very impressed by the Entei version actually of like newer builds of it. There you have a basic Pokemon that's relatively efficient and like in attacking, you can charge it in 1 turn. You can draw cards with it even. That's great. Dex definitely needs some extra consistency. And yeah, it has like solid damage output. And yeah, you can even forest to it. So like your main attacker is a V that you can forest to, which is great. The most powerful version is still like Urshifu, just rapid flowing right away, obviously, like very good. But then you're leaning more into like the cheese thing there. I just kind of like how Entei is like a little bit more stable. You can relatively consistently just stream attackers with that variant. So that seems good. Satu is actually like extremely powerful, but has a little bit more variance in the early game again. So I have like mixed feelings about that now as well. But if you find like the right list, and that deck can definitely be pretty good as well. But like if you're just starting out, then you probably would have most success with Shifu and just hope to hit the right matchups, or like Entei, which seems like relatively okay. But again, the deck is just very all in early game, and it runs very fast, but has like very, very high chance of just like stumbling and falling flat on its face a
Yeah.
lot of the time as well.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, and the final deck I want to talk about in particular before some quick fire questions. Pablo, stall. Do we need to respect it? It's obviously seen a big uptick. It feels like it's been a long time since we've actually seen a consistent enough stall deck for people to just pick up and play. It's been a couple of years, I think, to be honest. Do people need to respect it? And how, if so, how hard do people need to be teching for it? Is it just an extra churro in a pal pad, or is it all the way to like a mini or somewhere in between? How much are we respecting stall for this tournament?
I think based on its success so far and the popularity of it, like how easy it is to pick up and the level of interest in it, I definitely think it's important to be ready for it. What being ready means, it's either you know exactly what you need to do, right? Which some decks don't need to tag against it. They just need to figure out exactly how to conserve their resources properly, which attackers to power up. Yeah. And others might need to directly tag against it. I would personally not tag a specific card against it that wasn't also useful in other matchups. So Turo is a good card. Turo has definitely uses outside of against Snorlax. I feel like the Minior is definitely like you're playing too scared of your opponent when Snorlax is going to be maximum 5% in the room. So 95 out of 100, you're not going to be playing with Snorlax and you're going to have a bad card in your deck, right? So I would definitely encourage people to also like take the deck and either play with it and learn how it works. Therefore, because like a lot of the times you're sitting there with Snorlax thinking, gosh, if my opponent does this, I'm like, it's over, you know? And it's like, so if you actually put yourself in that situation, then you'll understand how to beat the deck better. And I feel like stall, at least how it's built right now, and of course there will be differences, right? And there will be ways that I played stall that other players will have come up or will not have come up, and they will have other techs or other supporters or whatever in there. But I feel like if you understand how stall beats you, it's easier to beat it. But how stall is the most successful is when people are unaware of it or too scared of it. They find the deck annoying and they just completely mentally block themselves out of the game by misplaying and playing all these unnecessary cards, trying to rush them, and then you have those extra basics that eventually get trapped instead of being slow and steady and things like that. So I feel like that's the best way to prepare for stall. Play with it, learn with it, and make sure that whatever you have teched in there is also useful against other things, not just specifically stall. Yeah, where Turo is that card, I think, if you're really so fearful of it.
Yeah, great advice. Okay, cool. So that's kind of the decks in particular. Some final quickfire questions, and these will be for both of you. So Tord, we will start with you. What do you think is going to be the highest placing stage 2 deck, and where do you think it will place? So I'm thinking basically like Guardi, Zard, I guess Chi and Pow as well, because it's got a stage 2. What do you think is going to be the highest placing of those 3 decks, and where do you think is going to be where it's going to fall?
I mean, I have to go with Gardevoir, and I think top 8, like a Gardevoir in top 8, seems very reasonable.
Yeah.
I think it seems to be fairly popular as well. Like, but I mean, it might change. The meta changes, every other day so far. So
Yeah.
But as of today, Monday the 13th, it seems to be very popular. So I expect like a decent chunk of people to play it, and I expect it to make top 8. Let's say top 4. Like that
Top 4.
seems reasonable.
Okay, cool. Same question for you, Pablo. What's going to be the highest place? Is it going to be Gardevoir, or do you think Charizard is going to edge out, or even Chi and Pow?
I wholeheartedly agree with Gardevoir, and I would imagine it's gonna get top 8. Yeah, I would be very surprised if it didn't get at least one Gardevoir in top 8 at LAIC. Can it win? I don't know, but definitely top 8.
Yeah. Okay. Similar question, Pablo. Highest placing Comfey/Colrus type archetype, and where will it place? Is it going to be Tina, or is it going to be a Lost Box still?
I would imagine, like, since Lost Box encompasses so many things, probably a Lost Box variant, but I don't think we see one in top 8. I think the highest placing we'll see one will be top 32 or so.
Okay. And same to you, Tord.
Actually, I think it might be Tina. Because like there will probably be like a decent chunk of people playing it. So I'm playing by the numbers here.
Okay.
So
Yeah, makes
I think
sense.
one of them will just be able to like outmaneuver the early game disadvantage and just like draw well enough to get her. And like the deck is good though. Like the deck has always been good. Um, but it's always been a little bit like iffy in the early game. But now you can do the like a much better comeback turns with the Roxanne Pat Conte Catcher. I think the Conte Catcher helps quite a lot though. Just like with if you do the Roxanne Pat as well, because then it unlocks two good plays for you. You can either go Tina V Star and blow up the most important Pokemon they have in play while you disrupt them, or you can, if you're really screwed, you can bring something up and then Sableye snipe the bench again. And off of 2 cards and Padlock, if you're just randomly stuck, then you can make big comebacks and win games you should have no business winning whatsoever. So
Makes sense.
someone will probably be able to like take advantage of that to some degree.
Yeah. Okay. Highest placing Paradox Pokemon. So I'm thinking either like ancient or future Pokemon. Tord, what do you think it's going to be? Do you think it's going to be Roaring Moon as a deck, or do you think it's going to be, I guess, Iron Valiant or Iron Hands are the only two other realistic ones in an archetype instead?
Playing the numbers game again, and then say Roaring Moon, I think so.
Yeah.
But yeah, like depending on how you build it, it feels more consistent than the other variants as well. I mean, at least Chin Pao, that's not like even a debate. But then yeah, like Miraidon has a really good ability, so it's a little bit harder there. I think that one is much closer.
Yeah. And same for you, Pablo. Highest placing Paradox Pokemon, and where will it place?
I mean, like, Roaring Moon is definitely the archetype, but I think Iron Hands has a chance at squeaking into a higher spot in a different sort of deck.
Yeah, makes a lot of
I'm
sense.
gonna go with Iron Hands.
Okay, cool. And final question before we do some shout outs. Pablo, what are going to be the top 3 most played archetypes, do you think?
I would imagine it's gonna be definitely number 1, Roaring Moon. I think based on recent tournaments, probably Gardevoir as number 2. And number 3 is the more difficult one because it has been Qianbao, but clearly that has not converted good enough. So I'm gonna go with Tina as a third one.
Yeah, pretty safe 3, I think. Tord, what about yours? What do you think are going to be the 3 most played archetypes?
I think that seems relatively fair. I'm also not sure about the third one. Might favor Charizard over Tina though.
Yeah.
Like Charizard EX, because I feel like the actually I like the Beeple version a little bit more with the TM than I like the Gardevoir version, just because like I don't think the like Charizard's alternative, right, is the Candy turn 2 opening, right? While Gardevoir's alternative is Mirage Step. So I mean, like one is clearly a lot better than the other, like more consistent, right? Like if you have to choose one away. So and I was thinking the TM Evolution build is very easy to play as like a Charizard player. Like you can get it pretty often as well. And like if you do it, like the rest of the game kind of plays itself. Like you do the TM, you have your Roentgen, you have your Charmeleon. All you need to do now is put down the Zard and you're rolling, right? That's it. That's all you have to do. It's like just because like the easiness of playing the deck as well, I feel like it can be like a top pick for many. Like most decks are really difficult to play. So any deck that just has more accessibility for more people to play at a high level will like just see more play naturally. I think so. I'll probably pick Zard. Like Tina is difficult. Like you really need to fight as like Pablo knows, like when he played it. So to squeak out games. So like Shard, you don't have to fight that hard. You just have to put down your lizards and just start smacking. So
yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. I'm really excited to see what happens this weekend. Pablo, do you want to do some shout outs before we wrap things up?
I mean, shout out to you guys. Thanks so much for having me. Joe messaged me and thank you for hosting. And then, I mean, can I name my sponsors?
Yeah, of course. Go for it.
Team Toys Terminal, Photon Store, Dragon Shield, and Hyperbeam cards, all fantastic supporters. And then, of course, TC Evolutions. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without them.
Excellent. And you can see Pablo's Twitter username just below him on the screen. Similarly for you, Tor, do you want to give some shout outs before we wrap things up?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun. Shout out everyone still cheering me on. I will do my best again this year. I was really lucky last year. I don't think I will be as lucky this year, but I'll do my best anyway. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, like I said, thank you so much for joining me. Tord, good luck for this weekend, and Pablo, good luck, but in a different sense. I'm hoping to see you two again, maybe even casting and playing in the final. We never know. But yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. I've been Jack from OmniPoke, and I'm going to see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.